All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this, oh, sorry, I added a poll there. Welcome to our upheaval management series. This week we are talking to Paige from Tree Ring Digital about how to save your assets. And by assets, we mean your digital assets. Something that definitely isn't talked about a lot or really ever, in the sense of what do you do with your digital assets, or who knows where they are, what happens to them in an M&A transaction, or just any type of transition of ownership from the company. So we want to share with you today some insight on what that looks like. And before we get into everything, I want to share with everybody that we do have the Elevate Summit for entrepreneurs and business owners coming virtually to you in November. It's split into 2 days this time, so that you're not sitting at your computer for 10 hours that day. Give you a little break in between the sessions. So it's the 18th and 19th of November. I'm gonna put a link in the chat box right now. Click on that link. It takes you to the landing page and you can sign up for the wait list so that the second tickets open, any new information comes out about it, you will be the first to be notified about that, which is a really great option for you, so you don't have to keep monitoring your email and making sure you're waiting for something to come out. You know you're going to get it. With that in mind, this webinar we're doing today with Paige directly correlates to a topic we're talking about on the second day, about due diligence, the due diligence process. And this is kind of where this information would come up. So getting back onto the webinar, like I said, we have Paige from Tree Ring Digital. Paige has been working with business owners, authors, and other organizations for more than a decade, helping with all of their digital marketing needs. She founded Tree Ring Digital, which for the last 3 years has been ranked a top marketing agency in Denver, Colorado. And under her leadership, the agency has created and developed hundreds of websites. Paige has a bachelor's in IT with a concentration in website design, where she graduated with honors. So since then, she's been using her education and her intuition to develop her own unique vision of website design and digital marketing strategies. And we at Blue Sky have been lucky enough to be working with them for the last 2 years almost, and had some great results. So I'm super excited to introduce you today, Paige, and thank you so much for being on our webinar today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So where do we start?
Yeah, so digital assets, I mean, it means so much. And when businesses first get started, they focus a good amount of their time and attention on building the brand, having the brand logo, having a tagline, working through a variety of the assets. And in the digital space, that goes one step further into what are we doing for digital ads? What are we doing for their website? Where are we finding the consistencies in that messaging? Who's the target audience? And when you're a business of a certain size and really getting into that like mid and large size business and even some of the corporate sides, it's really easy. You've got someone focused 100% of their time dedicated to every piece of that asset. But when we start to see maybe a smaller mid-sized business merge into, or let's just not, before we even get to the merge, as you're just a small and mid-sized business and you're growing, you don't really care. You usually are working with multiple digital marketing agencies. You've got one person working on this piece. You've got a graphic designer over here. You've got your web team over here. None of them really talking, but that's just, I feel like, part of like the growing a business, right? And crap, okay, well, we need someone that can do this. And then all of a sudden your needs change. So you decide to hire a different company for something else. And rarely do we find that they really talk together. And so it's really important that we hone in and work with the business to really understand, what is this messaging and how do we stay consistent, and who's the one that gets the judgment call when you start to do other pieces. And so other like ways that we've seen it is they'll be like, well, since you're the marketing team, you go work with the marketing people. And since you're a different division, we'll just have you put all this paperwork that goes out the door to, this. There's no clear messaging there. It's one, those two people usually aren't talking to one another.
Right.
And so when we talk about digital assets, it's not just your logo. What do we do from there? It's not just your business cards. How do we keep them similar as we keep moving through? It really goes into, are we using the same call to actions throughout? Are we using the same taglines in most location and on all locations?
Yeah.
Are we using similar imagery that matches what that feel and that audience that we're trying to attract is? And so it goes a lot further. And that's where a lot of people don't always understand, what are we doing with all this? Where is this stored? And how do we make sure there's approval before it goes out the door? Because most often, great, looks good, go.
Yeah.
And that's what we, really experience a lot, or what a lot of the clients before coming to us really sees is, great, I don't have time to even review it, just send it. And so that's what we try really hard to focus on. And then, yeah, as we get into the merger and acquisition piece of it, what's getting carried over and what are we doing with those assets when this happens? And so we try to work with clients where they're first getting ready to and really building those assets, because I feel like when you have a solid foundation with your brand assets going into a merger and acquisition, it just gives them a little bit more to say, like, yeah, this is a business we want to buy. Yeah, this is something we want to acquire. Yeah, I'm willing to pay a little extra for that. So really helping them understand what the big picture looks like with all of it, and how starting to fine tune that before the process can actually be helpful in the long run. So that's really the main thing we like to look at and talk about.
Well, I can say I'm a one that, hey, it looks good, let's send it. So I definitely understand that. And I'm sure a lot of smaller companies are in the same boat with that I am.
Well, and it hones into everything. If you look at your Facebook and Twitter profiles, let's just say,
Right.
probably two completely different company descriptions,
Oh,
because you typed one, then
uh-huh.
one day you're like, oh crap, I should go start Twitter. Now you open it up and you just type whatever came to mind that day for Twitter's description.
Yes.
But did we really slow down and look at the target audience and who we are trying to attract by having that profile on Twitter? Or are we staying consistent with the brand verbiage and language and messaging? And so that's where I think it turns into an even more wild animal, if you will, than just print assets of, we've got brochures, we've got business cards, we've got, a one sheet, let's go from there. So that, because the digital space, there's so much and it's taking over marketing like crazy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And not even to mention that even your target audience can differ from Facebook to LinkedIn to Instagram or whatever you're using. So you could have multiple different copy trying to reach
Right.
people, but then your message may become unclear with that too. So, oh my gosh. Yeah.
And the search engines like that consistency. They like to know that this is, in fact, specifically what this business is about. They do offer this service. We run into it. Are we a website company or a marketing company? And so we always have to be very all encompassing, but very quick to the point when we say what we're doing, because it's not something that we can just do one over here, one over there, because then even your search engines start to go, where do we put them? What do they do? I have no idea what's happening now.
So when you're even just pre-planning before a potential transition, or you're just starting the marketing phase of, putting your business out there for sale, what do you tell your clients as far as the digital asset side of things?
As far as the digital assets, it's like, where are they? Who's got control of them? Do they have original artwork? So many times we've gotten logos and we're like, cool, it's the JPEG version. Like, that's going to get us maybe to your Facebook profile, if anything, but that's about as far as we're going to be able to get with that one asset. And so we really have to work with them of, do you actually own vector files of your logo? Do you actually own the copyrights to your logo? I've asked it more often than I ever have of like, Did you read your contract? What's that say? And they're like, I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
like, who owns your logo? Like, do you in fact own it or not? Yeah, every company has their own terms when it comes down to it. And, if we can create vector copies of it, but that's what you need to do is like, then let's slow down and get that in place so that we know what we're going to do with that. So we can go make whatever it is from a material side that we need to create. And like when you're going to do M&A transaction, you really want to focus on how are we putting it out there? What's the first thing you're going to do is you want to announce it through a press release. Okay, well, if we don't have great copies of our assets, if we don't know what that messaging is that we even want to say, is it really an effective press release to put out the door? Or should we be slowing down and getting that honed in? But a company that comes to us and says, here's everything we've been doing, we've already got, who are, these taglines, more or less trademark, they don't have to be, but let's just say they know that that's their go-to trademark or a tagline. We know that this is our standard little blurb and here's our go-to call to action. Makes that press release and, news media and everything you're trying to do to get more awareness on the transaction, more exposure, but you're also going to get people taking action that they might not have taken action on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially I've seen it a handful of times where the company will send us marketing collateral, like a brochure, business cards, all that stuff to include in the offering memorandum. And then I go look at their website and it's a completely different design. They don't match. The collateral is usually outdated because nobody hands it out anymore, but they're still using it. And when you show,
Well, and that's the difference of different companies, right? They went to a graphic designer printer for this. They went to a web company for their website. And then they've got another company focused on their, pay-per-click ads or whatever it is. They're not talking very, very rarely, unless it's like we're working, with a partner of ours that we work with regularly. Rarely have we ever had a marketing company reach out and go, hey, we're working on something. Could you help us on the website side? I don't know if we've really ever gotten that in the past decade, like we try to do it more often, but that's because we completely understand the consistency and the cohesiveness of what it is that we're trying to do. I need to know that if they stumbled upon your paper because it was on the ground left over from something and they show up at the website, they know dang well that they're at the right spot. And that's what we focus with our clients on.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because now that I'm thinking about it, that was one of the first things you asked us was, hey, send me all your marketing collateral so that we have that consistency in the flow from one to the other. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because here's the thing, there's so many businesses with similar but different like names that, and especially like URLs, we're like, oh, should I buy the .com or should I buy the .net? And it's like, you don't understand if that .com is even remotely close to what you do. No, there's absolutely no value in buying the .net for your business because every single person of traffic is going to go to the .com.
Right.
And so they don't realize these subtle little things start to make differences. And so by having that logo show up right there front and center, having the same consistency and theme, then it's like, all right, yeah, I made it to the right spot. This looks like that billboard I drove by. And yes, it is what I was trying to purchase today.
That just made me think of a question when we were talking about the URL. So would you consider that part of the digital assets as well? Like knowing where your domain is hosted and who's hosting it, all that stuff as well?
100%. A lot of small businesses, and I will say our company is guilty of it. The fact that we purchase domains on behalf of our clients, they own them. They have full access to the domain registrar, all of that. But there's a lot of crap that gets sold during that transaction that I'm always just like, we're just going to take care of it because otherwise it's 10 phone calls later because you want to walk through it. But I can't tell you how many domain names we probably actually own of our clients and they only know where it's at because they know us, but if something happened, they would have no idea how to access or what to do. And granted, we send them an email, here's your login details, here's where it's at, whatever. But no, I mean, and then you get to merger and acquisition. We are dealing with a large nationwide company right now, and they've got, I think, 6 different domain registrars, about 200 some domains total amongst them all. And it's like, who's managing this? Who's watching for the next one? Who's making sure that you don't lose it? Who's making sure that it gets renewed in time? Who's making sure, is it redirecting to something else just to get a smidge of traffic?
Yeah.
If you're gonna buy that many, are we doing anything with it? And so, no, I mean, your domain name, I tell them, if you lose your domain name, you're pretty much starting your business over. If you lose your website, your hosting, any of that, we can recover from.
Yeah.
But if you lose your domain name or someone else has it and is like going to hold it hostage, let's say,
Yeah.
you're done. You might as well start your business all over again, because that domain name is literally like your
Yeah,
business.
absolutely. Especially if you do any selling on the internet as well.
In anything. But I mean, like, what's the first thing every business does when they start is, I'm going to go buy a domain name and I'm going to do businessname.com.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That's how everybody knows you. That's what it is. That's what you're putting every single dollar you put into marketing, brand awareness, exposure, networking, referrals on your business cards, everything
Mm-hmm.
relates to that one piece of information. And the second that you lose that because you didn't renew it in time, I think we've seen at least 10 domain names just get bought right out from under them through domain registrars because they didn't renew in time. And it's like, if that happens, you're done. You can spend the $2,500 to buy it back, or you can just, all right, I guess we're rebranding. Here we go. So do protect that. And I would work with a professional to merge them all into one registrar, because the one that's hanging out over here that the admin bought, no one's ever going to remember it. No one's going to remember that's where it was at. And so then one day it's going to get lost. And so really making sure that it's in one spot, that the right people have access to it, and that you can access those domains is super important.
Well, so how do you recommend going about setting up like an actual management strategy of all these assets?
So, one of the things we'd look at would be the pros and cons. And I would break it down step by step as we go through the digital piece of it. So with the domain name, how many do we have? Where are they at? If they're all in one spot, we're good to go. If they're scattered about, see which one has the best renewal price, because they all vary. I know that one company charges, I don't know, it's like $35 or $40 to renew a domain, and yet another one will charge you 20. And I think because we've got so many, we're on a domain discount program that we actually get them renewed for like $10, And so think about where that is. But I mean, it's an additional cost. And if you're spending $34 on it to renew a domain name every year, it's not a lot, but it adds up. And it also is a business expense. So looking at then, how many do you have? What are your goals, especially if you're going to start merging them in, to figure out which one of the 3 domain registrars, let's say, that you should be merging all of them into the one. So that's the first thing. And then, like I said, making sure you've got the right people in charge of that account with the right recovery options. Next would be looking at your hosting and what's going on there, and figuring out, are you best on a third-party server? Are you best working specifically with the client or with your, web provider? Or do you want your own internal servers? And we've seen everything. Most of our clients go on ours because it allows us so much more control to really resolve issues when they come up. Mm-hmm. But there are some that are like, we have our own servers because we do blank, and it just makes sense. And it's like, by all means, like, own it. Yeah. But know that you have access to it. Too many times it's, no, we can't give you access to our hosting account because that's where the 40 other clients are on. And I don't trust that you're not going to touch another file on there. I'm paying you for hosting. I'm paying you for this. Shouldn't you be able to access my website files that I paid for? Yeah. Well, but oftentimes it's not. So knowing who owns those assets really at the end of the day, or if they're on a setting like that, where are they storing backups? How often can you get a backup? Do you have any control if something happened that you're like, no, I have a go-to of my site and I can find it right here? And so owning and bringing back around the asset of your hosting, because that's your website files. That could easily be $4,500 loss if anything happens. You didn't renew your domain name or your hosting account in time. It could be lost. It got hacked and you didn't have any backups. There you're starting all over at times. And so protecting that digital asset of what is the level of security and who is in charge of this website? Because it can be a very, very quick $4,500 bill. Crap, we weren't expecting it. And how can you hand that off in an M&A transaction to the buyer and say, here you go? And asking that before the transaction, who owns your website? What's going on with it? Do we want to keep it there or not? Can we get a copy of your website? Is the website included in this transaction, or are you keeping the website? Knowing all of that stuff going into a transaction can be very helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
So working through that, then getting through your emails, figuring out what's going on with your emails. More or less these days, it's pretty much going through Office 365 or G Suite would be the two that we'd recommend. Some are using private servers for that. Honestly, we're really just recommending most clients get into one of those two. That's what they do day in and day out. But again, can you create more? Can you not create more? Who has control over that? If someone leaves your company tomorrow, are they the ones that have the login details to it? You lose your emails and who knows what's coming out of.
Mhm. Welcome
I'm
back.
back. Thank you. I'm not sure why it dropped, but at least I'm back.
Yeah, that was interesting. But you cut off right when you were talking about if an employee leaves and they have login credentials to the email. What happened?
I mean, they could either go start sending emails on your behalf, or they could just never give you your email accounts back. So, who owns and who controls that? And I mean, I get it. Like my entire team has access to all of the login details,
Mhm.
but I'm the one that has the master so that if something happens, it's a quick boom done. And we can make those changes. That's not necessarily something I decided to let my assistant have access to, right? It's like, who's the one in the hierarchy and level of command that should have access to these things? It makes sense for others in the company to be able to do it, but who owns it
Well,
is what you want to be looking at.
want to have those checks and balances with your employees of who has access to what, so not one person doesn't have access to everything, so that you could have that kind of hostile takeover situation.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's something that we have to think about with the amount of login details that we deal with on a regular basis. I mean, what's the security check? What are we doing? And how quickly, if something happens, can we do something? And that's just us managing loads of clients. But internally, I mean, what that can do for one, a merger and acquisition, but two, just a business in general to have the emails go down.
Yeah.
And then start looking at where are we storing files for the marketing efforts?
Right.
Who has access to the logo? Where is it at? And I know we get it all the time. I finally one day just created a tree ring folder that was like, this is one version of the logo you can use, and this is the other. Yes, I have others for my records because I can do things and modify it and edit it how I want. But I know that my team is always like, oh, they need a logo for something for us. What do we do? Go to the folder, send them what you got, because at least we know one of those two logos are correct, but you're not trying to pick and choose. The next thing you know, you chose one where the circle is completely in a different location than we've ever put it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we want to make sure that same logo is going out over and over and over again. So I try to keep one that's very focused for business of here are the files that you need. Yes, you may have versions of, you may have, a variation for this, that, or the other, but these are the go-to so that no matter what someone pulls out of that folder, it's at least on brand.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to do as much quality checking and assurance later with it all.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then, going that we try to work with clients too on the whole outline of who's your target audience? What are your taglines? What makes you unique? What are your go-to sentences? What are your go-to hashtags for Instagram and social? What are your go-tos for these? And put it all together in a nice little document for them so that one, they have it ready to go and anybody can pull them. Oh, I'm supposed to be doing this company's social media. Copy paste, drop the hashtags. We're never going outside or going rogue. But then as you go into a merger and acquisition, you have more stuff that you're like, no, we have all of this ready to go for you.
Yeah.
All the research has been done and it's in a nice little file, if you will, that has it all. And so finding ways that you can, prepare that going into just adds a little more value to the business because it starts to make it more turnkey. They can buy the business and know they can pick up right where they left off. It's not like, oh, we bought this business, but we're still going to have to go build a website. We're still going to have to go, create all these directory listings somewhere. We're still going to have to go put the footprint in Google. It allows you to, no, it's all there. We maybe change a contact number and keep going.
Yeah.
So those, other ways that we look at it. So that's, how we start to get through is just simplify, streamline, and get just the stuff that people need in front of their face, and let other folders do other things behind them or in the background, instead of, like, my team doesn't have access to a lot of the business files.
Sure.
They have access to the templates, the branded guides, all the stuff they need access to, and that's it. And so that's what we work with our clients on when trying to figure out how to start managing those assets.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I really like the keeping a folder with the current version of the logo, because I know with us at Blue Sky, we have a couple variations of it, and that, yeah, here, use this one. This is what you get. And then you don't.
And then all of a sudden they're all over the place. And the whole point of brand recognition is the one logo, right, over and over and over again. Maybe it's, image on the side content, or maybe it's image above content, whatever, but the same thing over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can have fun with it. You can totally do like 20th anniversary, sure, but then move it right away, because in your 30th year, you don't want to be using the 20th anniversary logo, because that's just what somebody grabbed for that marketing piece.
Right. Right. So have you had experiences with clients that went through an M&A transaction where this didn't go so well?
In terms of like didn't go so well, there's different ways that it comes down. I mean, when we get to the other side after the transaction happens, things we start looking at is, are they revamping stuff or not? Are we merging logos? Are we keeping one logo? Or are we just fading out logos? Mm-hmm. And I say logo meaning company, really, in terms of, if we're like, let's see here. One of them was a pizza place. They kept most everything. Mm-hmm. But then they're like, we're just going to change the name though, because we do want people to know it's under new ownership. We do want them to know that we're no longer affiliated with this piece of it, but like, we'll keep the same colors. We'll keep the same feel. We'll keep this pretty close to a similar name. And so, we started working with the new owners on that kind of rebrand, if you will, of like, we have all the artwork, we have all the assets, because we created it before that, the transaction. Sure. But I'm going to save you a lot of time, because we're just going to flop out your logo on all this stuff and send it back out the door to print instead of starting from scratch. And they were just like, that is so much nicer to just be able to know that we didn't spend thousands of dollars to have to rebrand. Yeah. But instead we were able to just spend your time on changing out the logo and send it out the door. Yeah. And so, I think those are ways that, how do we keep as much consistency? But businesses come after a transaction, as you guys know, in so many different ways, where sometimes they're like, no, we want to keep two completely separate companies. How do we do that? Mm-hmm. And how much do we merge them and marry them together? And how much do we not? One of the businesses we worked with, they came to us, they're a really big size business, and they bought out just a small little mom and pop shop. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you guys were going to buy, but great. And they're like, yeah, I think we're going to keep the website for a while though. Okay, let's talk about why. Like, what is it that this website is bringing you that your nationwide presence isn't bringing you? And they were just like, the loyalty and the fact that these contractors come to us over and over and over again, that we know we need to ease them into the transition. We can't just overnight come in, change out all the marketing and logos and everything and go. Yeah. And they had SEO value behind it. The domain name that they purchased carried a lot of weight in SEO. And so for them to enter into a new market was a lot easier to keep what was already there and start to do two logos on the website. Oh, okay. Business one, business two. Yeah. So that's one way that we've worked with some businesses through it. And then that particular business now has been bought out by an even larger company. So now we're talking about, how do we take this little transaction, merger and acquisition over here to actually a full-on nationwide holding company purchasing it out. Wow. And for that, that's, I think, one that we still struggle through with them, even because I don't think they've got a clear vision of how much are we keeping stuff separate
Sure.
and how much do we have like a holding company. So we more or less went in and built a holding company website with all of the logos so
Okay.
they could put all their marketing to that
Hmm.
while still individually marketing each of the locations and offices, but integrating it in. Now we have a map that says on each of the various companies, it says, and here are our partners. We also do business in these 20 other states. And so how do we start marrying? But I'm telling you, the first thing that they said, I think we redesigned two or three of their websites now.
Okay.
And they finally came to us the other day and said, we'd like to get all of these websites on point with brand.
Ah.
That should have happened like
The
a
first
year, 2 years ago when you first purchased. But now we have to go back through and rebrand every single website to match color, look, and feel
one. Oh,
when
wow.
we should have just done it from the beginning. And so, not that that's like a hiccup or a mess up or didn't go well, but that's having like knowing why are we purchasing this business and what are we going to do with it? What is the real reason that we're acquiring it? And how does it help us continue to grow? But you could tell they didn't really know. They bought it, they knew what it was going to do from like an investor side.
Right.
They didn't know what to actually do with brand consistency, cohesiveness, and assets. And
Yeah.
now it's costing them more because we have to go back through and say, that's cool, but it's going to cost me to change all of your colors, your fonts throughout your entire site. And, so being prepared and going into it and knowing, is it colors that we're keeping consistent, but letting them stick to their logos? Are we going to merge logos out and stick to one new brand, one brand as opposed to 3, 4, 5?
Mhm.
Another company we work with that has a bunch of smaller companies, everything's separate. They want to make sure that they know that it's just a holding company at the top. That's all it is. But every single organization below is different color scheme, different model, different demographic, different business. There is no consistency other than they all do the same service.
Yeah.
And so we work with them of, great, how are we going to handle that then? And who are we listening to when it comes to, if this change happens here, does it happen on that website or not? And I mean, I think we deal with 10 different people of like, this person's only in charge of this website. This person's only, it's just chaotic. We
Yeah.
can handle it and it's fine. But man, I can't I mean, one person asks for something and I'm like, you do know if we just implement it on all the sites, it'd be cheaper. But instead, like one person says it, and then 6 months later, guaranteed the next company brings it up. And then 6 months later, the next one brings it up. And I'm just like, I want to streamline for you. How do we just do this once and keep you all moving? You all have the same goals, all sites work about the same, and it doesn't. So I feel it costs the company more money if they're not organized when it comes to their assets.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're maintaining separate sites and oh my gosh. Well, and not to mention separate sites, but then how many social media profiles do they have? Goodness,
Yeah.
a lot.
It that part gets a lot harder. I mean, Facebook itself is starting to make stuff easier because for a long time they wouldn't let small businesses have multiple locations. You'd either have to run one Facebook account, one address, but put everything on it, or two completely separate Facebook accounts and make sure they knew they were separate Facebook accounts.
Oh,
Facebook's finally introducing, like for example, we have an office in St. Petersburg, Florida, as well as Denver, Colorado. And
mhm.
as a small business, we can finally have one main page and two subsites that you could link out to from that. So they're making some of that easier, but who has control over it? When we worked with a nationwide franchise, oh my gosh, we had to go through like all these NDAs. We had to go through all of these agreements that we'd sign the right paperwork and use exactly their brand. They had to send us the brand folder that said, here are the only stock photos you're allowed to use. We've already taken all the photography. You must use this. Here's the fonts. That is a dream client for me. If you can send me exactly what I need, I will sign paperwork all day long to make sure I've got good photos, to make sure I know exactly what font, and that everything we put up fits the rest of corporate's wants, or, the franchise needs. And so, but I'm telling you, they had that process down. That is one organization that was doing it really well with, you can only access it, and I'm only going to give you access to this one Facebook account, not every franchise's account. We
Mhm.
had one point person to go to that would authorize us to give us access to what we needed. And so we see more and more of that. But there's one point person, they're the key holder, if you will. They're the ones that are going to say, yes, you may now go and have all of these assets and use them, appropriately. You sign documents saying you would,
Right.
but oh my gosh, there are ads that go out. You wouldn't know if it came out from us or came out from corporate, because we have this guideline to stick to, and it makes that company look so much better
Yeah.
than us doing something, than an in-house designer trying something on Canva real quick, and then you got, someone else throwing something else out the door. It's like, are they professional? Is this a company I want to trust? What are we doing? And so that's a couple, I think that was, one thing we were going to talk about was having everything stored in a central location. We already talked about, but one thing that we've done for a couple of our clients to help them through this process and journey is creating like an intranet for them, if you
Oh,
will. So
yeah.
when they log into their website, we can assign roles to certain people.
Mhm.
And now they have access to the COVID notice that they need to have on every single website, so that they're not, every franchise is asking and trying to figure out what random verbiage may or may not be approved by legal.
Okay.
Nope. You go to the website, you log in, and right there, it's going to tell you the COVID notice. How do we do email marketing? Go to the website. There's 4 templates for you. Going to go out. You just have to copy paste, put it out the door. What if I want to do a digital ad? Boom, right here is 20 copies of ad work you can use. Choose what you want, add it to Facebook, go. So now we start to create this resource and directory for them where everything's just simplified and lined out, where it takes like these franchise owners, oh, I just have to log in and get whatever I want. And it makes the owner of the franchise offering more value.
Yeah.
We have marketing for you. That's why you should buy our franchise, not something else. Or if you go into that merger and acquisition, we have these things. So as these companies that we acquire, they're not running blind of like, well, how do we fall in line with what they want?
Mhm.
It's all for you right here. Welcome to the team. Here's all the assets you're going to need to make this successful. And
So
so that's the sort of stuff.
can any website do an intranet like that? And could you store your logo, approved logos and all your stuff right there too?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got it where, in one of the cases, this particular case that I'm talking about is for more franchise,
Sure.
but the franchise owner can log in and they only see a couple things on the site. They can't control much else past like 3 settings.
Okay.
But I'm like, no, you're not touching more than that. But after that, there's a button and it says, resources and assets. They click it, it'll take them over to the directory just automatically. They don't need to have a separate login. They can just log right in and have access and easily sort through, filter through, and find what they're looking for.
Mhm.
And it provides now communication between like the corporate level to be able to say, we're putting random communication out. Do you check it often? Or crap, we've got this thing going on. How do we want to handle it? So they can put it right there in front of all of their centers very quickly, as
Mhm.
opposed to, well, I never got the email. I
Right.
didn't ever see the email. I didn't know you sent me, a COVID notice in an email. And
Right.
so now it's like, no, just everything's right there. If you ever have a question, log in, we'll communicate with you through there, and all your resources are there. So yes, building out internally makes that, we know where it's at. We can give them definitions too. Here's exactly when you use this. Here's why that you would use this. This is what this is for. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of, which one of these contracts do I need for this? I don't know what I'm sending a client.
Well, and something else that would make that super easy for, at least for companies that maybe aren't a franchise, but say their office manager leaves the company and the new person has to take over and it's all right there versus, okay, is it on a shared drive? Is it in Google Docs? Where is it? It's nope, log in, we'll give you your credentials. It's all right there for you.
Was it uploaded? Like, I know sometimes internally we ran into it where it's like, I'll go edit a contract. I'm like, oh yeah, we need to get that in the contract. And then does the rest of the team though, are they using the edited version? Because I know I need to be using the edited version. and they might not be. So like, yeah, I mean, ours isn't probably the best process, but like we'll put it in Google Drive and I'll say updated on this date. So they know like, all right, that's probably the most recent one then. So that's the one we should use. But no, I mean, yes, if we had a system like what we're, talking about there, then it says last updated, this is the correct version. Here's the one you want, so that everyone can go and get that version, not the 3 iterations prior to. And next thing you know, you got some random lawsuit on you now.
Right. My favorite one was I had somebody use a contract from like 2 years prior because they searched in their email for it and we're like, oh, there it is. And like, yeah, no.
When I type in like hosting contract and I pull up an old logo from before we rebranded, I'm like, yeah, I'm hoping no one's sending that one out the door. We should probably do something and find why hosting contracts not pulling up our actual hosting contract. But it's a struggle for every single business. It doesn't matter what size, and so that's where I really, in talking with you today is making sure people realize it's setting it up from the beginning is the easiest, but it's okay if you didn't. We can go back and make it. A lot of businesses aren't expecting to do an M&A transaction. And next thing you know, they're like, oh, great, there's an opportunity. Let's look at it.
Right.
And so how do we then get that stuff set up? How do we make that a smoother transition? Or I mean, for example, I was never ever one to be like, oh yeah, I think down the road I'll buy a business maybe. That'd be great. And now, as you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're growing, we're doing good, we should. Okay, like what am I going to make sure I need from these people? Or how do we merge that asset into what we currently have? Or what's the right version? What's the wrong version? And just like we talked about, are we branding in both names? Are we doing powered by? Are we, completely getting rid of that brand altogether? So having a purpose when going into that merger and acquisition to really understand why are we doing it and what's the benefit that we're going to get out of this will help guide how you want to handle those assets and what needs to stay and what needs to change.
We have a checklist that we give out to our clients at the beginning of the relationship of us, marketing their business. And we kind of have 2 separate ones, a financial due diligence one, which, is your profit and loss, your balance sheet, all that good stuff. And then legal due diligence, which is like your corporate minutes, your LLC, or, your corporate paperwork, all that good stuff. I really think that we need to start implementing a digital checklist into that as well. So we give it to them at the beginning of the process so that when we get to due diligence 6 months, let's say, down the road, and the buyer is starting to ask for it, you can just say, here it is. And we already have it populated in a data room where you could easily start getting your digital stuff ready to go so that when we flip to due diligence, you have it ready. So even if you don't have it set up today, there's still hope for you. We can get you on.
Sometimes some of it doesn't matter, or like, okay, so you've got your logo, but it's not vectored. That's fine. It's just costs. When we look at merger acquisition stuff, I'm always explaining, think of it as a house and you're going to sell it. And then you go and get the inspection done and they're like, hey, the roof's not great. We want you to fix the roof before we'll buy. Yeah. Well, that just took value out of what you were wanting to sell it for. Right. And I feel the same way when we go into those transactions and we're looking at, I'm sure, and you guys look at it from another side too with the financials and everything, but like if they're going to have to step in and rebuild a website right off the bat, if they're going to have to go in and spend X amount of money rebranding because you came to them with a kind of a crappy brand to begin with, that's outdated and never been updated since you opened 20 years ago, they're probably going to say, I want less for this because I already know it's going to cost me blank to just even get you up to today and be able to start marketing this and moving forward. And so the more that we can work with them ahead of time on having traffic consistently driven, converting traffic driven, having the right assets, having all this in place, then it starts to make it something that you're actually going into the transaction with more leverage than, all right, I guess we're going to have to bring the price down and make this work and really negotiate back and forth before we say yes.
Have you worked with a client where there was a lot of conversation around price and with the assets not being up to date? Have you run into that?
It depends on what they're wanting to do. Okay. So, in one case, if it's so outdated that it's like they're just buying the mom and pop shop, it's about to go out, It depends on if they've already got the infrastructure, the one that's buying it,
Mhm.
that they're just like, we're good. We're literally just going to drop our logo on your storefront and we do this all day, every day.
Mhm.
Then no, it doesn't, may not play such a role.
Mhm.
But if you're kind of a smaller business looking to acquire, then you want more of that asset in place. You want to know that you can leave the sign up for the next year, make the profit, and then take the sign down and put the new one up. Or, have the money coming in that's going to offset the cost to do some of that stuff. So there definitely is. I mean, if you've got a broken website that is just not doing anything, it's going to hurt, because then they're going to say, you're not really converting anybody. So how do I actually know that this is a good business for me to buy,
Mhm.
other than the fact that you have a name?
Mhm.
But, or you're driving traffic, but no one's converting. It might not be the best investment then,
Right.
you're spending how much on marketing dollars to acquire all of this? But if we could streamline marketing and get more people converting, then we actually show less of a expense
Right.
on your guys' side with some of that on the financials of, no, we can actually acquire new clients for 50 cents per client, not $50 per client. That looks a lot better when you're going to decide if you should buy or not. So when you start to look at those things, they do actually play a really big role in it, but from maybe other reasons that you might not think, like we talked about, profit loss, expenses,
Mhm.
cost to acquire a customer, client, whatever, those all add up, but maybe not so something someone would directly relate to your brand, your website, your digital assets. They just impact and make a difference in those final numbers on the financing side.
So if I'm starting out, I don't have any of my stuff. I don't know where anything is. I don't know who has access to it. What is your top couple things that you would say you need to get a handle on this overall before anything
Domain
else?
hosting and logo.
Okay.
I mean, if you have absolutely nothing else, own your domain name, own your hosting, and own your logo. Your hosting back in the day used to be tied to your emails too, which is why I'd say that's so important.
Sure.
Um, your hosting has all of the site files. I don't need you to like own a hosting server, but
Right.
just have access and admin access, not something that the development company could lock you out of for whatever reason, but like that you can actually get into. I can't tell you how many clients, I can't make that edit on my site because my web hosting company won't give me access. No, we don't. If you want access, here you go, have everything you need. And it's so frustrating because they don't actually own their website. They don't own their website at all. And that is a huge expense to redo.
That actually happened to a company I worked for. On the bottom of the footer, it said hosted or powered by or whoever designed it, and they would not give them access to take that off. Even after like 2 years or something that it had been done, like they have still locked them out of that.
Well, you've moved on, right? You're like, oh, I'll just leave the site hosted here. It's totally fine. No worries. But we're going to go work with a different company now. They're going to help us. Well, yeah, why can't I go? Well, because we still own your site. No, you didn't. Like someone else has been managing it for 3 years. Like, why can you not take your name off? And then, like, no, you should be able to have anybody, the new company even, go in, find the footer, remove it, and keep moving. And so that's where I say read your contracts. We've seen some crazy, crazy stuff of all the content we write is actually our content, not yours. So we've seen lawsuits when we go to rebuild a website,
Mhm.
clients like, oh, you're good. We love the content. We're going to keep the content. Just want a new look. Okay. So we go and redesign, drop the content. Next thing you know, we've got a cease and desist that states you need to remove the content or they're going to sue us. And it's like, the client paid you to write the content, no? So then technically it should be their content because they own the rights. Contract states differently.
Wow.
And so, it's watching those different things as you go through. We do a lot of custom artwork for our websites.
Mhm.
Our contract states that everyone owns what that is and
Okay.
that artwork. But at the end of the day, there's others that are like, no, that's our custom artwork. We did that. So that's our property, not yours. It's just part of your site. And so read your contracts because every web company is going to say something slightly different. What is yours and what's not your asset at the end of the day.
That's interesting. So what if I have just a JPEG file of my logo that maybe somebody created for us 10 years ago? Who knows if they're in business anymore? How do you take that and convert it? Do you have to entirely like put it back into Adobe Illustrator or to make that vector file, or what's
We'll take a look. I mean, some we get really, really lucky with because they're so simple that
there?
yes, we could just outline it and go.
Okay.
We did have a client come to us about a year ago. Oh my gosh, this logo is totally from like 1970s, but she loves it. Her favorite logo, doesn't want to change it. And I'm just like, I can't just blah, blah, and here's your logo in vector form. Like we literally have to recreate the whole thing, go back through the layers, go back through the shapes, the objects, making every single point as you go and making it
Uh-huh.
vector. So for her, we were like, it's not a new logo, but it's a new
But it
logo.
is. Yeah.
It is. And you can, unless you're using like a photo that you took from, oh, I went outside, I took a photo, and now I want that photo in my logo. We can pretty much convert anything other than that into like redo it into a vector format.
Interesting. I am by no means a graphic designer, although I must confess I am a Canva user. So
What they're doing with Canva, I'm telling you, it's hard to say too much negative about it. But I've also seen, and it's like, okay, that template when it started was real good, but now that you've touched it,
yeah.
no, that's not hitting our brand at all. That's not following fonts. It's not following font sizes. That's not following typography and design. And now we just look like we did it ourselves type of thing. And that's not what you want.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, that's a lot of information thrown at us, but I mean, coming from where I stand at Blue Sky and I manage a lot of our digital assets, this is actually
Right.
super awesome hearing all of this, knowing that I at least have some of my ducks in a row and know where
You got a few of the checks in the checkbox done.
some maybe not so much, but most of them, yes. But definitely worth, even if a client is thinking of an acquisition or not, just worth knowing where all this stuff is, who has access, so that you don't get locked out or, heaven forbid, some ransomware or something for your domain if you don't register.
Well, and who owns the domain and after that transaction? Maybe you're like, you can have everything, but I want to maintain domain and logo because there's a sentimental meaning to me to have that logo and that business name, but you can have everything else. And so knowing, is that part of the transaction or not? And is that coming with it? And that goes on the acquiring side too. I mean, if you're going to acquire, what assets are coming with it? Because it isn't cut and dry. It isn't, oh, we're just going to buy the whole brand so we get everything that comes along with it. They may say, this website, that's something special. I'm keeping the website because of the functionality that I have paid to have done. That's not part of the business. That like the brand is the business. The website is something that I'm going to go do blank with instead.
I can't say that I've ever seen that happen, but I suppose that you could say that.
It's what do they own, right? What is it that they're selling at the end of the day as part of that yes, technically it should be cut and dry.
Yeah.
But if they want to keep the domain name because they've built the business name, but they're going to sell off their client list and this, that, and the other,
Yeah.
Maybe they do that. And so knowing on both sides, whether you're selling or whether you're buying, what's going on in that transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has, again, just been great information, Paige. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for letting us join you today. And I just really enjoyed talking more with you and just I always say people don't realize that asset side of it, or they don't realize that there's more to it than your logo. And there really, really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just went and put the elevate-biz.com link again in the chat box. So go over to our landing page, sign up for the wait list. And like I said at the beginning of the webinar, all the stuff that we are talking about today is super relevant to that due diligence conversation that we're having on day 2, November 19th of the Entrepreneurs Summit this coming fall. So go ahead, get on that wait list. And as soon as tickets are announced, you will be first to notify on that and be able to get those tickets ahead of time. And we are, yeah, we are super excited and hope to see you all there. And again, Paige, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.